Hi friends, my name is Leroy Phillips and I'd like to welcome you to this Facebook Live from Georgetown, Guyana, my home country. First, about myself. I'm totally blind and have been so for 21 years. I have been through the school system in Guyana and I will partially highlight some of those experiences once possible in this Facebook Live. I've been a disability advocate since 2006 when I first got involved in blind cricket, and then in 2008 in Leonard Cheshire Disability Young Voices when I started out as a normal member. Then I became PRO and president at the latter years before it came to an end. And I have been doing advocacy work with the Global Partnership for Education and several other international and local and regional bodies. Children with disabilities, especially girls, are vulnerable to SRGBV. Let me start with telling you what definitions who are children with disabilities. Children who have a physical or mental condition that limits their movements, senses, or activities are children with disabilities. Disabilities can be physical, like deafness, blindness, etc., or mental, like children with learning disabilities. With such disability, like blindness in my case, going to school could be difficult or impossible without special provisions. When I was 10, it was then that I realized for the first time that I needed special provisions to go to school. Because of my blindness, I needed ramps and rails. I needed to be taught the layout of the school. I needed to be taught Braille, a language used by blind people where they read by touch. But because of the discrimination and disadvantage faced by children and youth with disabilities, many of us are not able to go to school. About 62 million children at the primary school age around the world have a disability, and 186 million children with disabilities have not completed primary education. One of the top factors keeping children with disabilities away from education is school-related gender-based violence. Studies have shown that patterns of gender-based violence in schools are influenced by discrimination against specific groups, including women and the disabled. Such violence can be in the form of sexual violence, bullying in real life and online, and violence is a form of discipline. So why are disabled children, specifically girls, more at risk of gender-based violence? There is a skewed power dynamic in school. Teachers and administrators have great power over students, and the power dynamic becomes even more problematic with disabled children. For example, when a girl cannot see, hear, or speak, or if she has an intellectual disability, people in power assume that they can get away with violence and abuse. Or a girl with a learning disability who scores low in her exams are at risk of facing violence and abuse from teachers as negotiation for increased scores. And with girls, society places an additional burden on them. Society blames them for any harm or violence that happens to them. For both girls and children with disabilities, government institutions do not provide enough support. School authorities and police often do not believe children with intellectual disability. When they describe their experiences of SRGBV, for example, the consequences are tragic. The act of violence itself causes trauma. The helplessness faced by disabled children adds to the trauma. And when no one believes you, you feel even more alone or without support. Creating safe spaces for children with disabilities. All children, regardless of their gender or disability, have the right to quality education. This is the mandate of the Sustainable Development Goal 4. But the question is, how do we reach SDG 4? How do we provide equitable and inclusive quality education for all? One important part of this is to ensure that children are safe from school-related gender-based violence, because children, especially girls with disabilities, are most vulnerable to SRGBV. This means that we should put an even greater emphasis on ensuring that they are safe. The first step is to ensure that there are a mechanism for prevention and redressal of complaints about SRGBV. Firstly, all countries should have appropriate laws addressing SRGBV. Schools should provide comprehensive training on sexual and health rights, as well as the various forms of violence, so that students can identify SRGBV. Reporting of SRGBV should be encouraged within schools, at home, and at the police. Once reported, there should be proper investigation and penalties for the culprits. But for this to be successful, schools, administrators, parents, and government officials and other students need to stop discriminating against children with disabilities. Harmful social beliefs and practices, like believing that children with disabilities have been punished by God and therefore need to be treated poorly, will never allow children with disabilities to get justice. But another question is, can we do something to change the education system to protect children with disabilities from SRGBV? One effective way of doing this is to make education sector plans gender responsive. This means when government writes up an education sector plans, it should do a gender analysis of the education sector. How many girls and boys are going to school? Why is there gender disparity? How many are facing SRGBV? Additionally, they need to do an analysis of disability in education. How many students are disabled? What schools do they attend? And what is the gender disparity therein? The government must form strong partnership with civil society, research institutions, etc., and consult with them about what are the best ways to prevent and address SRGBV. But this cannot be done without the Ministry of Education alone. The planning process needs to involve other ministries like the Ministry of Health and Finance. This way, we can make a change at an individual level and a system level. The last question to address is, what can you and I do? We can go out there and campaign our governments and schools for stronger laws against SRGBV. We can join local society efforts to definitely make a difference and help children with disabilities. And we can support organizations like the Global Partnership for Education, GPE, which are trying to ensure that governments have strong gender-responsive education sectors plan. My name is Leroy Phillips. I want to thank each and every one of you across the world for taking the time out to listen to this live video on SRGBV. Few days from now, we will be observing International Youth Day, so I trust that many of you would put a lot of safety measures in place where young persons are concerned, so that this world can continue developing in an area where everyone, especially youth, will feel part and parcel of the development, or rather growth, of our society. Thank you very much.